Hello everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many beautiful faces, such a sea of people. It is a special night to be here for the launch of Always Was, Always Will Be here in Naarm. I certainly know you've been talking about it in your sister's country, so it's wonderful to be here on Indigenous Literacy Day, actually sharing this gorgeous book with you. It's a testament to Thomas and the work that he did throughout the campaign. I certainly know there weren't many other people in Australia who did more with their heart as openly as he did, trying to get that vote across. So my name is Shelley Ware, and I'm a proud Yankunytjatjara Wirangu Gugitha woman from South Australia, but I've lived here in Naarm for the past 25 years, and it is wonderful to be here with all of you. I would like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this gorgeous country that we get to live on every day, and thank them for caring for it, and so that we can share it with the next generation as we take on that cultural responsibility to care for this gorgeous country. And I pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in the room, and of course to all First Nations peoples and the stories that your families have shared with you to make you who you are as you walk through this world. Well, I think he deserves a round of applause just to start the day. It's absolutely brilliant, so thank you. It's pretty special to be here. And it was a campaign for justice, and recognition does continue, as it says here on the cover. But I want to just do my own reading, and Thomas has got a better voice and he's going to sound much nicer than me, but I'm going to read out something just to set the scene on what this amazing book is about. And this is just in the front of the book. It says, in the wake of the referendum, versions of the same question have been posed by many of us. What should we do next? Whether you voted yes or no, this book is for all those good people who have asked this question. Within these pages are the ingredients for hope, energy, motivation, and a belief in what we cannot yet see. You will find a guide to critical thinking, from the depths of the past to the truths and the lies of the present, and a map, as practical as any tool I could give you, to see where the hazards are, the obstacles and the barriers, and finally, a clear indication of how to reach our common destination, justice and recognition for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The campaign continues. Yeah. Beautiful. So can we please welcome the man of the hour to the stage? Please welcome Thomas.
Thank you. Kapu kut, murabuai, good evening, my people, and I feel like I'm really amongst friends. Thank you, Shelley, for the introduction. I acknowledge country and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here today. In the launches of this book around the country, I really wanted to take the opportunity to celebrate all of the fellow Australians that put their shoulders to the wheel during the referendum campaign and did so much, gave up their time, stared down the intimidation of the No campaign, and did everything that they could to help us to succeed. And that is one of the things that the book is about, but the launches in themselves, I wanted to invite several of those people in each area to say a few words. Because the book isn't about me, the campaign wasn't about me, it's about all of us. And I hope that you enjoy hearing from these three people. The first person that I'll introduce is Beck McCann, and she was captain for Wills for Yes. I was just inspired during the campaign when I went to Coburg and said a few words to the people that her and the other leaders in the area were organising, inspired by her energy and her passion. So Beck, come up and say a few words. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Thomas. That was such a gracious invitation, but we wouldn't expect anything less from you. I want to also start by acknowledging country. I want to pay my respect to elders past and present. Acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This was stolen land. And I want to acknowledge the people that cared for it before we got to enjoy it. Okay, I'm a bit nervous, so I'll just take a breath. So as Thomas said, my name's Beck. I'm a union organiser, and outside of my day job, I'm also an activist, and I love to get involved in other campaigns that aren't at work, campaigns that I feel I can make a difference in. I was active in last year's referendum campaign, both in the union movement's campaign efforts and as part of the Wheels for Yes group. And I'll just acknowledge that there are some others in the room here, including other captains, and we are continuing in our work. So if you want to know more about that, we're called First Nations Justice Wheels. And I know I'm not the only one, and Megan might mention their group as well. So it was my absolute privilege during that campaign. It was honestly incredible to work alongside a really committed and inspiring bunch of people, volunteers like me, and some of whom are here tonight as well, as I've said. And honestly, it was the most powerful and the most memorable campaigning movement that I've been a part of. So long before I joined the Labor movement, I was aware of and invested in matters of social justice. I started to become conscious of my various privileges when I was quite young, learning that we don't all have equal access to opportunities that will allow us to thrive. Sorry, I just saw my dad. So sometimes this inequality is visible. I remember as a child when we were on holiday in New York, and I asked Mum and Dad to give me all of their money. For the people that we saw on the streets there, yeah? So my eyes were open at 8 years of age in a very real way to the poverty and disadvantage that people face through no fault or free choice of their own, yeah? However, some of the most profound examples of that disadvantage are less visible. And here in our country, I think that's true. So they're out of sight, actually, for many of us. So when it comes to the starkest inequalities in this country, called Australia, we know that these are borne by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And often they're not only out of our daily field of vision, they're outside completely of our consciousness, right? Because their communities are completely separate from our own. Dad, I've done the old-fashioned thing. I printed it out. So many of us don't even know an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. You know, many of us white fellas, I guess, is what I'm saying. And the truth is that familiarity matters. And this is a point that Thomas raises in this book. And he's said it before in interviews and things as well, I think, eh? And it's so important. So he also talks about it, cultivating that familiarity as being one of the practical steps we can actually take towards reconciliation. So I think that's sort of one of the key things I'm just talking about now as well. And, you know, as someone committed to social justice, I've, of course, been shocked and appalled by the bleak outcomes for First Nations people in this country of ours. And depressed by the status quo, whenever it was brought to my attention, I despaired at the statistics and the so-called gap. But I want to be honest, and so I have to admit to you, even as an activist, that before the Voice referendum, my despair mostly dissolved into sort of apathy or, inaction anyway. So to come back to that point of familiarity, I do think it's true that, inaction and apathy are more likely if you have limited or no proximity with Indigenous people or culture. And so I know that was the case for me. Well, I think it was part of the case. But the good news is, and the reason that I have hope and the thing that gives me hope and the profound truth, I really think, of the referendum campaign, even though the outcome was, a disaster and not what we wanted. For me and for many others, I really think the referendum woke us up from that well-meaning but inactive commitment to racial justice. And it geared my rage and despair towards something more useful. It gave me and many others like me something tangible to work towards, and some action to take and a role that we knew we had to play. So another thing that I think, and that's relevant here, is the most profound part of it and the Voice campaign was that we were invited in by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders and leaders who told us really clearly what our role is, what our role was. And I think Thomas is telling us what our role still is. And in doing so, they gave us also an insight, I think, into Indigenous culture, I'm learning, which is a generous and collective one, somewhat like unions. Where are my unionists at? And showed those of us who didn't understand this fact yet that this fight for racial justice, it's all of ours to have. And I think it's really important to note that for some of us, we gained a familiarity with Indigenous people and culture that we didn't have before. The grace, patience, determination and resilience of Indigenous leaders, the likes of Rachel Perkins, the Honourable and recently retired Linda Burney, and from the union movement that I'm so proud to be a part of, Lara Watson, Rachel Boss, and of course Thomas Mayo, is what gave me hope and continues to. Thomas has given us a roadmap in this book, and it's meaningful and practical steps we can take together. And he shares them with the same generosity of spirit that we can hear and feel in the Uluru Statement from the heart. So if leaders like Thomas can choose hope, despite the historic and ongoing injustice faced by his peoples, then of course we will continue to walk alongside them. As an activist and social justice campaigner, as an ally and comrade, I'm grateful to Thomas for writing this book and for inviting me to speak tonight. And I encourage everyone here to get a copy and also get a copy for someone you love so they can be part of the change that's coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Beck. That was powerful. The next speaker is Megan Bolch, and Megan is here with her two little children who I met with Megan at, what's that place? Monty. We're out at Monty in Victoria. It was a very cold morning, drove all the way out there, and we did handouts, flyers and all the rest. And Daisy and Roy are here tonight. So welcome, Daisy and Roy. Thank you for your efforts, kids. So please welcome Megan.
Where are you, Daisy and Roy? Oh, hi. Wawa, hello, in the Woiwurrung language of the Wurundjeri people whose lands we're gathering on tonight. Nungodjin, thank you, Thomas, for the invitation to join you tonight. I begin by acknowledging that tonight we are meeting on the ancient and modern lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Woiwurrung language group, acknowledging Wurundjeri elders past and present and all First Peoples here tonight and across this country as the custodians of country today and since time immemorial. Thomas, especially you. Your deep roots extend across this country, creating connections, educating and supporting our forests, our trees, dropping seeds of hope and inspiration. Your latest book, Just Another, on this land that always was and always will be. Thomas, tonight you asked me to come here to talk about hope. And tonight I thought I'd share my metaphor for hope in this space of allyship that I've only just realised this week, or discovered. Who's here? Who's from Melbourne? Windy Narm. Yeah, lots of us, hey? So you will have noticed, no doubt, the trees in the winds, how they maintain their strength as the howling winds blew through them, gracefully bending and swaying as the wind grabs hold of their branches and leaves. their interconnected roots and mycelium networks underground reinforcing their inner strength as the storm bellows through. These winds and our trees have reminded me a lot of last year. There was an opportunity for the trees to grow, but a storm bigger than expected ripped through these trees and the forests across this country. But the trees are still standing, strong, their interconnected vast networks of roots now bigger than they've ever been, and the storm has now passed. Our neighbour has this one tree that I've been in awe of for about the past 10 years. And last week, as I watched this particular beautiful, mature, proud, tall gum tree, it reminded me of you, Thomas. I felt its humble wisdom as it stood steady and strong as the gale winds forced themselves through it, grounded by its deep, interconnected roots that span across this country. Storms come and storms go. It's how we weather the storm. It's what we learn from the storms. It's how we expand upon our deeply rooted systems of interconnection underground that makes us all stronger from the storms. These storms and that beautiful, strong and steady tree made me realise that all trees from across this country represent all of us here tonight, First Nations people and all allies. We are diverse in age. I myself might not look this old, but I'm only 13, in this space of allyship. I spent the first 10 years growing really slowly. I kept getting cut down as I butted heads with humans that I hadn't yet learnt how to articulate the conversations that were needed in this space as a tree. My roots connected with people who were growing as trees themselves, and we grabbed hold of each other. And then we started a group called Monty First Nations Allies, and we held each other and collectively grew. Then we connected with Barban and Beek, the Indigenous Community Centre in West Heidelberg, and our roots truly deepened. At Sorry Day last year, our roots connected with Reconciliation Banyul and Jagga Jagga for Yes, where they began to multiply and the systems of exchange and actions truly intensified. And so my roots and our collective roots just kept getting more connected and stronger and better connecting and caring for other trees. In turn, growing our forests and their mycelium networks supported by the sun, the rain, the stillness, and the storms. Last year, our forests grew. We welcomed the germination of thousands of seeds. My question to all of you are, how will we care for this abundance of new young trees so that they in turn can care for other trees and plant new seeds? How will we sow more seeds? How will we keep our forest systems in balance? And how will we care for our root systems? Thomas, your new book provides our trees, their supporting organisations and policymakers with a formula to support these questions. This formula is, and you'll all read it in the book, it's people power, strong, supportive, diverse networks of trees in our forests, multiplied by organisations acting, representing all those groups beyond our tending to our ecosystems and mycelium networks, whose role it is to support the balance and health of our forests and trees. Multiplied by good policy that ensures our forests are protected, healthy, can grow and evolve and are never cut down. Multiplied by consistency. Our trees, their supporting organisations and policymakers that flow and move with the seasons year after year, generation after generation. I invite you all now to close your eyes or bow your heads. Imagine you are sitting outside under your favourite tree. There are some younger gums in the distance and some elders just around the corner. Your roots are all connected. There's a new gum tree shoot to your left. This one voted no. You tried really hard to help it understand why constitutional change was important, but for whatever reason they didn't hear. But now the storm has passed and they can hear more clearly. You've gently kept dropping seeds of hope and this one germinated. You can see it popping above the soil, knowing the roots below were twice as big. What's your role in caring for this new young tree? Are your roots going to connect with theirs? What actions might you take to connect with them with what they need right now? And what organisations might you connect them with? Open your eyes, beautiful trees. The answers to these questions for me are the hope, because we all have the capacity to consider how we will answer and act upon each of them, as individual trees and as a collective forest. With the support of Thomas and the wisdom from with always will, always will, always was, always will be. I'm so honoured to be a tree within this ecosystem with you all. Nungojan, thank you, Thomas, for all that you are, for all that you give, and for this next book, and for inviting me to be here tonight.
Thank you, Megan. Beautiful words. I'm sure you moved plenty of people during the campaign. And finally, I want to just invite Uncle Charles to say a few words. Uncle Charles is an independent journalist. I think many of you might have come across Uncle Charles over the years. He does a mountain of work in the area. He's the second in three successive generations of black journos. He's got a deep understanding of the media. He's staunch, black and proud. Welcome, Uncle Charles.
Bloody tall people. There we go. Nyama, Waranjeri Boy Warangulin, Guringanyinu, Bikwenrop Nyan Dari. Nyariana, Nyanga, Bik Banba Nyagu, Gagukal Nugget Yalambu Bagamaji. In the language of the Waranjeri Boy Warang people, traditional owners of this country, over which sovereignty has never and will never, it is my belief, will ever be ceded, I have said that I acknowledge we are on their country, that I recognise their connection to their land, their waters and their culture, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and those who will come in future years and build on the efforts of those who've gone before. Tonight, I'm going to speak, rather than the book, but about the man behind the book, because this is every bit as important, not just to us, but let me assure you, to Australia, as the contents of this book. I've got it over many of you. I first met Thomas back in October 2019 when I was asked to moderate the Reconciliation Victoria 2019 statewide reconciliation forum in Fitzroy or North Fitzroy. On that panel were three Aboriginal people. The first was Belinda Duarte, an amazing woman who was at that time co-chair of Reconciliation Victoria. The second was Lydia Thorpe, who at that time was in between stints of state government and then into federal government. And the third was this amazing man of whom I'd heard much and read more, Thomas Mayo. He was gaining prominence right across the country as a staunch advocate for and educator of a constitutionally enshrined voice, or First Nations voice to Parliament. He was the one who had been chartered to carry with him around this country that document which brings us all here tonight. That amazing piece of writing, unlike anything else that has been seen in this country before, and it is my belief in our lifetimes will never be seen again. Of course, the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And this quiet man impressed me mightily when, from one particular panellist, he received antagonistic remarks about him, the statement itself, and of course the process that led to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Throughout it all, Thomas maintained a degree of calm and integrity that I rarely see in any person of statute or position. Now, since that time, I've had the opportunity to interview Thomas on a number of occasions and even speak alongside him In every single case, he has maintained that calm and dignity, coupled with clear authority and integrity. And that sets him well and truly as a man to whom we should listen. Importantly, we need to bear in mind that while we may welcome the words he says, the sentiments he espouses, and the arguments he delivers, there are those in this country who will despise and deride, and it is this book, this very book, that should serve as a means by which we are able to deflect the never-ending barrage of misinformation that has and will continue to poison the narrative of voice, treaty and truth in this country. I'll go off script for a second and let me say to you right now, if for 1 second you believe that poison stopped on the 14th of October 2023, you're off your bloody rockers, because it will continue as states and territories move towards treaty, as we soon find in the middle of next year when we see the handing down of the final report from the Yoorrook Justice Commission in this state. Do not think for a second that those in the conservative side of politics and media will let us go without a word being said. We'll go back to the script. I'm nearly done, brother. I saw time and time again during the campaign of 2023, and I'll say the failed campaign, let's call a spade, folks, that many of those advocating for a yes were falling short in presenting a solid case for the voice and encountering that barrage of misinformation for one reason alone: a lack of knowledge. To those among you here tonight who truly wish, and I shall borrow from the Uluru Statement of the Heart, to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future, I say this: read this book and take it on board as a valuable tool in helping you and others in that movement for a better Australia. This is something for which Thomas has been fighting for years. This is something that we must all recognise is indeed a fight. Powerful elements of conservative politics and media truly believe they struck a knockout blow against social progress in October 2023. This man, this book, these messages form part of a clear argument that they are wrong and that a better Australia is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Charles. Before we go to in conversation, Shelley and I just want to read a part of the book. It's from the first chapter, and the first chapter in the book is hope. And I knew that's where we needed to begin, because people have been so heartbroken. When we have hope, we can heal, as exercise awakens lost muscle. Hope is how we learn. If we don't take action, if we never try, we won't know how to lose, and then we'll never understand how we can win. Think about the struggle we've had toward justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people thus far. From 100% of the population to near annihilation, where are we today? Today, Indigenous groups have native title and land rights covering large swathes of the nation. Traditional owners have been able to use these rights to negotiate outcomes that will protect our country, and by negotiating ongoing benefits through Indigenous land use agreements. From an impressive all-Aboriginal cricket team in the late 19th century to Lionel Rose, Yvonne Goolagong, Michael Long, Kathy Freeman, Andrew McLeod, Patrick Mills, Big Artie Beetson, and so many others in sport. To Archie Roach, Yothu Yindi, Troy Cassar-Daley, Christine Arnoux, Emma Donovan, Dan Sultan, Briggs, Barker, and the King Stingray Band in music. The list goes on in a cascade of stars across our southern sky. We have seen an ever-expanding diversity of Indigenous academics and scholars, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are practicing law and becoming silks and judges, running lucrative businesses, leading their unions, writing and illustrating books, and winning elections to represent us in Parliament. When I was a child, I don't think there were any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander doctors, but as of 2021, according to reports from Indigenous-led Australian Indigenous Doctors Association, there was 519. Each of these achievements, across all the areas they excel in, have overcome prejudice and racism to become who they are, and each of them inspires hope for the next generation. When our elders first sought a right to vote, we were told no. When we first demanded equal wages, the answer was no. When we first marched and litigated for land rights and native title, they said no. In 2023, when we called for a voice in the Constitution, we received that familiar response, no. Why do we have hope? Because every time we were told no, we took action with non-Indigenous allies. We got that fire in our bellies, and here we are now, on the field winning games, in the boardrooms leading change, in the concert halls filling seats to capacity, in the universities lecturing, and in the parliaments representing all Australians. We are here to stay, and we say no does not mean no to progress. We always were and always will be for yes. Compared to 50 years ago, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. The statistics, the reality on the ground in many Indigenous communities, in the prison cells and on the hospital beds are a crying shame. Our gains are under attack. If you are walking with us, we must find our energy and give hope to others. If you are First Nations, continue to be loud and proud. Fight for your rights with the commitment and determination of your ancestors. Why have I written this book? The answer begins with the love of my family, community, and fellow Australians. Why are you reading this book? The answer is that you care. Together, we have hope. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thanks, Shelley.
Yeah, that was absolutely gorgeous. Thank you for reading that and sharing with that. And I want to just start by the fact that in this book you've been really generous about your stories of your family, and I love that you say here that you strive to give your children the best things that your dad gave you, that was love, protection, and a good example. I've consciously walked where he shone a light rather than live in his shadow. I've learnt from his mistakes and made my own, and I want my kids to learn from both of us, the good and the bad. And there are so many stories of your children sort of put throughout there. Why did you want to share through the lens of your family through this book?
I think the reason is because in the first chapter, Hope, I kind of analyse what hope is. And I was a bit worried about doing that because I don't read self-help books, and I was thinking, this might be a bit cliche talking about hope. But I really thought deeply about it, and I thought of it as energy. When we have, hope is like energy, and I thought about where do I get my energy from, and it really is from my children, from my family. And in that chapter, it's also important to introduce myself in that chapter to readers. And so I talk about how, I developed, from when my first child was born and how that changed my life and my attitude, working on the wharves and going through the 1998 Patrick's dispute. Some of you might remember that big dispute, and as a wharfie. And then making my first consciously political decisions, and that journey. And so but my kids are the main source of my hope, my family, and that's why they're interweaved throughout the book.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And I loved a story of when you went fishing with your son and you talk about his connection to country as well, and that we pass that on, and that our children have country in them, and that we celebrate country and the connection to country and caring for country. And it reminded me of when I took my son to Bali and we were scuba diving, and then when we got out, he had filled his pockets with rubbish that was floating in the ocean. So it's that kind of connection that we give our children to country, and it's beautifully reflected within this book, and it warmed my heart to that. But also where you talk to showing our children the intolerances that we see, that we are intolerant to racism, and we live through that. So it was really beautiful, and it's a really lovely connection. So thank you for that. And hope, like you feel, why was that? Like you've touched on it quite a bit. The paramount, why was it so paramount for hope to be in here when there are so many First Nations peoples that have lost hope? And is it for them as much as it is for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to remind ourselves of how much we've achieved. And, you know, I think, and I talk about this in the first chapter, hope is contagious, but so is hopelessness, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, this deficit discussion, you know, that we always have, I felt it important in that first chapter to just let's have a look at what we have achieved. Where have we come from? And we have faced these rejections so many times. And it is hard for us to hope because we do get those rejections all the time. I remember, you know, on the road, especially in the early days with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it's hard to inspire our mob for those reasons. And that's why that was also a place to start in this book, is just remembering what we have achieved and what we can achieve.
I love that. I'm completely filled with hope still, but I know that there are so many people that are struggling. So I think reading this book, this will be a lovely roadmap back to hope. It's gorgeous. Now, you gave so much of yourself during the time, and the Uluru Statement from the Heart, people are like, well, that's no longer important. What are your thoughts? Obviously, we think it is, but I just want you to share with them your thoughts on the Uluru Statement from the Heart and where what role it plays now.
Yeah, so what about the Uluru Statement now? That's the second chapter. And it's just, I'll take a moment to talk about the structure of the book. It's in 3 parts. The first part is basically hope, and that's those 2 chapters. The second part is 4 chapters of history, because it's important to take the lessons that we need to understand where we're going next. And then the final part is all about action, very practical guide, you know, about, and also a bit of analysis on what we're up against, which is really important. But with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, I believe it's the most powerful piece of writing that this country has ever seen, that has ever been produced. And it still moves people when they read it, whether they're reading it for the first time or they're reading it for the 10th time. And I tell a little story how soon after the referendum, I was in Sydney for the referendum night, and I stayed at Coogee Beach. I decided to stay away from home for another week. I'd only been home 25 days to that point that year, but I knew I would need to write something. And so I wrote that article that was published in the Saturday paper a week later. And I was thinking about the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and if I would ever recite it again, you know, I'd done it, I don't know, hundreds if not thousands of times over the 6 years. And I thought I could never do it again. You know, it would be too hard. I'd put in so much into it. But I was invited to speak at an event in January, and I was asked if I could do it. And I decided to recite the statement because it was, I began to see it as an act of defiance. To stand before people and recite those words as an act of defiance. But it is also still a statement of truth. And it also remains as eloquent and moving. And it also remains as something that is extremely logical in what it proposes. Because the proposition that you should listen to a people before you make decisions about them remains common sense. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Love that, and still love your passion around it too. Thank you.
Can't help it. I mean, it's just common sense, right? You should listen to people, right?
Absolutely
Jeez.
common sense. Absolutely. And that's what leads me to this question. Misinformation and disinformation played a huge role in the campaign failing on October the 14th. So you also talk about the fact, and you're very generous in the book to people who did have misinformation and disinformation, because it is easy to say, well, you should have educated yourself and you should have done this and now. Because we have a lot of people coming now and saying, oh, I should have voted yes. I didn't educate myself properly. So you were very generous in the book to the disinformation, saying that we can all have a moment where we are led by disinformation. So I thought that was very generous. But you also called people that I've wanted to call lots of other names bad actors. So where did you come to bad actors? And I love that generosity in calling them bad actors.
Yeah, just on the on the first bit first.
He's nicer than me.
I'm not being nice to disinformation. I can't stand it. It's just it's a horrible thing that's being used to bring our society into more dysfunction. But I really believe that we shouldn't. I've experienced that as well, Shelley.
Yeah,
people coming up to me since the referendum saying, "Oh my God, I have learnt some things recently, and I made the wrong decision in the referendum." And I think it's really important to think about that. Yeah. I think most no voters, we're not saying no to progress, as I mentioned in that extract. They are busy people. You know, we're all busy. We've all got things, pressures in our life. We have a, cost of living crisis. People are apathetic. People are disaffected by politics, and it turns them off. And so, when this disinformation, coming from so many different angles, is coming at our friends and family, then we need to understand, how they are able to believe those things. And I think we need to,
100%.
Do the work and have the patience and the tools that we need to turn them around. The bad actors, I had to make a conscious decision in writing this book. You can imagine, I was naming some people in the drafts and having a red hot dig at them. But I came to a realisation that these people are always going to be around.
Yeah. Right?
And bad actors, I can't remember exactly how I defined it, but it's people that would, use their energy for their own personal wealth, to hoard wealth, or for their own personal gain politically for power, at other people's cost. And I think most of us, want to get on in life and do well and prosper, but I think most of us don't want to do that at the expense of others.
Yes.
Right? And so bad actors, we're the rest of us, and bad actors are people like Peter Dutton.
There's one.
Well, and this isn't a bitter book.
No, not
this
at all.
isn't something that is about, trying to square up.
No.
I want people to understand what they're up to, though. That's what I want in this book. We need to analyse that. There's the obvious people, of course, but if we don't understand what they're up to, and if we're going to personalise it instead of understanding that these people are always going to be around, if we don't understand how they're trying to influence our friends and family, then how are we going to help our friends and family to stand against them with us?
Yeah, beautifully said.
And that's what this is about.
Absolutely. And it shows to your intelligence and the way that you have described it and worked that through the book, so congratulations to you. But knowing truth and history, that's the second part. Lots of history in there, and many people in this room may not even know some of the history that is in there, and you've really dug deep into that, even gone into the slavery of our people. So I know why it's important. Why did you really want to have that truth and history? You touched a little bit on it, but can you expand on that?
Yeah, as I was developing the book, I knew it was important I realised it was important to have just as we did in the Voice to Parliament handbook that Kerry and I wrote, they got Book of the Year in the ABIAs,
Yep.
actually.
I bought that for everyone I knew.
Which in itself, I'll just talk a little bit about that. When I heard that it was shortlisted, I wasn't going to go to the awards night because it was sort of bittersweet, and I spoke with Kerry, and Kerry's a great guy. Him and I were joined at the hip during the campaign for a lot of it. And he said, you should go and be there. And again, I came to realise, well, yeah, it's actually in itself an act of defiance as well to celebrate what was achieved with that book. It was so handy for so many Australians. Yeah. I forgot the question now.
So truth and history.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, so the 4 chapters, it's about 8,000 words. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot missing. But I wanted to pick those things that would help us to understand why we're in the present situation as well. And one of the, and throughout that, so it's not a dry academic, hopefully not boring sort of take on history. Throughout it, I, share my insights, some anecdotes, and also try to, challenge some misconceptions that people themselves that are reading the book might hold. And one of them, an example is, whether there was slavery in this country. And we've had 2 prime ministers in fairly recent times deny that there was slavery in this country. And, if you are, if you're doing 16-hour days and you're only paid in rations and you don't have time for recreation and, to bury your dead with dignity and practice the ceremonies, then, what are you? You're not a worker anymore, are you? You're a slave, And we call it blackbirding or, domestics, that we're training and, working for rations, very much so there was slavery. But it goes on to sort of revisit what happened when slavery ended. So, in 1966, the Gurindji mob walked off Wave Hill Station. It was one of many strikes by Aboriginal workers for equal wages. And when they achieved success, when in the early 70s there was equal wages, those Aboriginal workers were sacked, and pushed to the margins of their country off the stations and then on welfare. And then, non-Indigenous people exploited that and sold alcohol to people with no jobs, that had been through massacres, all that trauma, and collected their welfare money and made a lot of money out of selling alcohol. And then what does that do? The generational dysfunction. Absolutely. And then people talk about, youth crime as if, we've got the Country Liberal Party just elected again recently, wanting to lower the age of criminality to 10 years old, as if it's going to help a 10-year-old have a good life by locking them up in adult prisons. But people need to think about what are the things that lead to this, and that's why the history part is so important. And I'm confident that many in this room, would understand what I'm talking about, but there's so many Australians that don't. That's why both the Labor Party and the CLP had tough on crime policies in the Northern Territory, because they were influenced by voters that think that that's going to work, but it doesn't. And I hope that that part of the book will help people.
Yeah, and I love that that's a call to action for people to join that campaign as well. That's one of the calls to action throughout the book. It's, there are so many calls to actions, but you've got the hope for the future towards the end and the pathways of how it's all going to work out. You've got 23 ways that people can be involved, and there's so many others filtered throughout as well. They're going to fit you individually, aren't they? That they're not going to be the 23 ways that you can do all. I mean, I read it and went, I can do all 23 of those, and I'm going to do all 23 of those. And, it's so important. That pathway, why did you choose this pathway and setting it out so clearly?
When I was drafting the last chapter, I began by writing something like, I don't know what the formula is to reach justice and recognition for our people. And then I thought about it and I thought, hang on a second, I do know the formula. I mean, it's rather simple, right? I mean, it begins with care. Just like talking about children and youth crime, the way that you resolve these social issues is you actually put resources and effort into caring for your fellow citizens and addressing the root cause of those issues. And we see that, with international examples like Scandinavian countries that have been shutting down prisons because they've gone to that root cause and helped families. And so the formula that I came up with when I thought about how I could articulate it is people power, and I think Megan mentioned this, people power plus organisations acting plus good government policy multiplied by consistency. So people power is obviously the things that individuals can do, the sort of movements that got us to the referendum in the first place. Organisations acting, the organisations with reconciliation action plans, unions, schools, educating our children, early childhood, and good government policy, simply things like policies that do make sure that Indigenous people have a say before decisions are made in their communities. Policies of self-determination, policies that ensure that there is caring for country and these types of things. But the multiply by consistency part is that we've had all of those three things from time to time, but we've never had them consistently. And each of those three things play off each other, right? You have people power and organisations acting, you get better policies and you maintain better policies. So, that formula, I think, is what will help us to reach justice and recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's brilliant. And there are so many wonderful things that you can do. Like, I love the Recycle Your Yes campaign merch. And that's interesting because when I read that you were reluctant and then you did, I haven't actually worn my yes again. So after reading that, I'm like, I'm going to wear my yes again and stroll down the street and be pretty proud in that.
Yeah, I have too.
I know, I read that.
Because, I tell the story in the book how soon after the referendum, it was, my heart was just further crushed every time I saw a sticker or a placard still on a fence. And then, after doing some writing, I mean, we all have our ways of healing and finding hope again. But eventually I started to be like, yes,
I know.
thank you for keeping on wearing that, Seeing these
100%.
placards still up today around the place, it's like, yes. And so I want people to, to dust off their shirts and to wear them. You could get a texter or something and write something like my sister.
What does she
The
do?
first launch I had was in Townsville on Thursday, and my sister made these shirts. I didn't even realise what was written on them until she pointed it out later on in the event. But she's got things. The one she was wearing was, "I hate politics and I voted yes." And she had got me one that said, "I love fishing and I voted yes."
That's a good one.
So we can recycle these shirts, write something, defiant and,
I like
on them and start those conversations. Because as you know, Shelley, in there, the first thing that I say is to continue your conversations as if we're in a referendum campaign. And there's some guidance on how to have conversations in here too.
Now, we've got the anniversary coming up, and you also say in here to post on social media, actually commemorate that date. And in Victoria, a strong group of Aboriginal women, we've been getting together for months now to plan something to do in Parliament. So we're really excited about, acknowledging, and we're called taking our voice and showing that we still have a voice. So we're looking forward to that. So I hope that all of you do that. Take something forward with you and make sure that you're going to do something on that day and not let it just pass, because we've got to acknowledge it as history.
I love that, sister. And one of the chapters is flooding the zone with truth and hope.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of play on words, to the flooding the zone with shit, the Trump sort of strategy. We've got to flood the zone with truth and hope, and let's spread the word. 100%. On the anniversary, let's flood the zone with truth and hope. Do everything that you can, which reminds me of one of the important things I ask people to do in the book, and that is to record your experience. Record your experience from last year. So, the friends that you made, the things that you witnessed that, inspired you, the reasons why you got behind the campaign, the reasons you voted yes, but also the harder things like the racism that you witnessed or experienced, some of those more awful parts of what happened in the country at the time. And the reason is that we should be writing the truth about what happened. We collectively should be writing what the history is, what history, what is recorded in history. And if we don't do it, who will? We should record that. And I really strongly believe that what we tried to do last year, we will succeed at.
I do.
We were all on the right side of history, us who voted yes, because we will achieve it. And I know it because of what I talked about in that extract, that every time we've been told no, we've turned that no into yes. I know it because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people want this. Against that disinformation that was spread in the final weeks, unequivocally, we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people voted yes. There's this great, brilliant map that I saw that had larger circles for higher populations of Indigenous people per ballot box, smaller for lower, darker blue for yes, darker brown for no. And you just take one glance at that map and you can see with absolute certainty that we voted yes.
Yep.
And finally, young people voted yes.
Yes.
Generation Z, overwhelmingly voted yes. I know there's educators in the crowd. What you're doing is making a difference. Parents and guardians in this crowd, reading children's books by Indigenous authors is making a difference. And so as long as we record what we witnessed and what we felt last year, even if you think no one's going to read it, they might.
Yeah.
Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, they will learn those lessons from the history that we wrote, and they will do what we tried to do last year. We will achieve justice and recognition.
Absolutely. And even though that is an absolute perfect note to end on, I'm not going to because I have a couple more minutes. I love that you have put some useful resources in because, every time I do a talk or something, they'll go, but what else can I have? What resources? You've got to give me more. So there is a brilliant list of resources for people, and self-education is paramount in all the truth-telling. So this is a wonderful book. It goes beyond.
Yes, I wanted this to be practical, just useful. I know a lot of people carried around their Voice to Parliament handbook every day of the referendum campaign and handed them out. I want this to be the same thing. And those resources are going to be really important. I just want to, at this point, acknowledge the publishers in the room, Hardy Grant, and also, because I forgot to mention her every other time I've made a speech, my editor, who was very patient with me, because I wrote this in 5 to 6 months, I think. Bernadette Foley, a great comrade and friend who has edited most of my books. And the advice was to move those resources, a lot of them, to the back of the book. So in the back of the book, you'll find a great list of documentaries and movies and places to find resources for educators, and on the list goes, because one of the chapters is ways to become familiar. And it's one of the practical things that you can do, is to help others to become familiar with us so they can resist the lies that they'll continue to hear about us.
100%. Thank you so much. Are there any last words that you want to say, or are you happy with what you've said?
Well,
Any
I'm not
last
going to give
words,
such
Thomas?
a round of applause again so I'm just going to thank, I really want to thank you, Shelley, for doing this for me.
Thank
and,
you.
from the bottom of my heart, with a lot of love, I want to thank all of you for everything that you do for our people, my fellow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, your staunch advocacy for your mob, but everybody in this room that has really put your shoulder to the wheels over the years to help us continue to stand up loud and proud for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.